Hey there, and in this lesson, we are going to be making something happen. We're going to bring our application to life, introducing key events, so listening for the key presses, and as well as moving the paddle from side to side, depending on what key is pressed. So first thing that we want to do is add a request animation frame. So what this does is this is a method, and when you call this method, it allows us to create a nice smooth animation. There's a great example here when we run this function. What's going to happen here is that it gets initiated, so request animation frame step, and step is the function that contains the animation sequence, and it runs through this block of code, and if progress is less than 2000, then it requests animation frame step again, and it will continuously do so until progress is 2000, and once progress is 2000, then it's going to stop the animation. So this particular example will translate and it'll move the element across the page. So how about we take this and we try it within our code so I can demonstrate it, and then we'll apply the request animation to our code itself. Instead of element, I'm just going to use the container, and what's going to happen now is that it's going to move our element across the screen. It's going to translate its translate X property, so that will create some movement. So you see we get our element moving, and then once progress is equal to 2000, then it's going to stop the animation. You can also output it into the console, so you can see that progress is going to be continuously incrementing, and eventually once it reaches 2000, then it's going to stop moving. So that's how that works, and I'm going to block this out, but I'll keep it within the code. And you can read up more about it within the Mozilla Developer Network at the request animation page. So for now, what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new function. I call it update. And this is the function that we're going to run. And just as we start and we initiated the request animation frame step here, we're going to do the same thing with update. And what update is going to do is it's going to move our element, and then within update itself, we're going to call back to update. So it's going to continuously run update. So it'll continuously move the element or do whatever animations or animation checks that we want to do to the element. And the reason that I set that up is because we want to set up a particular value within the paddle where we're checking to see what keys are being pressed. So if left is pressed, then we want to take the appropriate action. If right is pressed, we want to take the appropriate action. And if the up key or the up arrow is pressed, then we want to release the ball for the user to start the gameplay. So let's set up the Keypress event listeners. So add event listener. And the event listener that we're listening for is key down. So any keys that are pressed down, it's going to initiate this function. We're passing in the event object, and we can console log that out. So the E object, and we're actually going to be listening for key code. So I'll output E for now, and then I'll show you what we're actually listening for. So now whenever I press the arrow keys, you can see that I'm getting the keyboard event is firing. And within the keyboard event object, you see all of this information is passed. So we know which key got pressed, and we can see the key down as well, the key type. And the one that we're actually going to be using is the key code. So that one is usually more accurate, but you can use any one of those because this is an object. So now whenever I press any of the keys, you can see that I'm tracking which key is being pressed. So that's on the key down. So I wanted to add in to the object where we're going to do a check to see if key code, and those were the arrow keys. So the one that we're looking for, and the arrow key for left is 37, right is 39, and up is 38. So we're checking to see if the key code is 37, and if it is, then the paddle object, we're going to attach a new value to it, and we're going to take paddle left, and we're going to set that to true. And then do some other checks as well. So we've got the 37, and 39 was the right arrow. We're checking to see, and if 39 is pressed, then paddle right is going to be true. And then within the request animation frame within update, we're going to check to see the value of paddle left and paddle right, and we're going to take the appropriate action for it. So this will actually begin to move our paddle. So having another condition, we're checking to see if paddle left, true. And if paddle is left, then that means that we want to move our current position. So let's first, we'll get the current paddle position. So this will be our current position. So paddle current position. And we can use offset in order to get that. So we're using offset left we'll return back the left position. I'll console log that out. So p current, log it out into the console so that you can see whatever the current position is of the paddle as we're updating. So now whenever I press start, our current position is offset 223, and we want to move that. So we want to take our p current and we want to, and this is moving left, so we're subtracting 5 off of it. And then taking paddle style and updating its left position, we can take whatever the value of p current is because it's changed and adding in pix to it. So let's see what happens. So now when I go and if I press start game, so that initiates the animation frame, and now I can move the paddle to the left, and you see we don't have the key up, so that is important because otherwise we just keep going to the left. We have no way to stop this to turn it to false. So what we want to do is turn it to false whenever the key is up, and whatever key is triggering the key press. So once we released up on up, then this is going to turn to false on left, and up on right is once it's released, then it's going to turn to false as well. So this will give us the ability to move it whenever the key is pressed. And we can press both keys at the same time. It doesn't matter because it's tracking all of the key downs and all of the key ups. So that is all being tracked. So the next thing that we want to do is update the if paddle is right. And if it is right, then we want to move it the other way. So that adding in right, and instead of subtracting, we're going to add 5 to it. And let's try that out. So now I can go left and right on my paddle. So there's a few other things that we need to add into the start game, but I did want to get some action happening. So go ahead and add this into your project. So this should give you the ability with the animation frame. So this is on a continuous loop and constantly looping to this block of code. And this block of code is checking to see whatever the value of paddle is. So these are Boolean values. So that way we know that if the key has been pressed down, then it's always going to be true. And once the key is released, then they go to false as a Boolean value. And then it will no longer update the current position of that element. So go ahead, try this out, add it into your code, and get your paddle moving with the arrow keys. And coming up next, we've got some fixes that we need to do to the start game, because obviously we want to get rid of the start game, we want to build our game board, we want to show the ball. So there's a bunch of stuff that we need to do to start the game. So that is all still yet to come.